Well, when it comes to the health of the Nemasket River, there are multiple issues going on. It's hard to pick one as the single most issue. It is a flat river that we can't do much about. The drop from Assawamsett to Wareham Street is only a matter of feet, and that's numbers of miles. So as an engineer, it's always intrigued me. It's a very flat river, and therefore it's susceptible to silt, slow moving water, and weeds. So it is very important, I think, that we've got the Herring Commission working to remove the weeds from the river because it has choked in.
Over the years, weed growth, both natural wetlands vegetation and invasive species of milfoil and fanwort, are starting to choke the rivers to the point where we're seriously concerned about herring passage issues. Eutrophication of the river itself, runoff from the roads that carries phosphorus nutrients, runoff from lawn fertilizers with phosphorus, sewage runoff, things of that sort all contribute to excess nutrients in the river, which in turn contributes to excess weed growth over the years.
We have a very unique problem that any type of weed removal has always been done on a pond level or a lake. We have a river system. Right now, if you look at it, this is a fast, free-flowing river. But again, in the summertime, when the water stops in no river, it's not a free-flowing river. It's basically stopped in between the sediment buildup that's been there for 100 years with no sediment removal, and you have the weeds that every year when they lower the water and block it off, the milfoil comes up, grows 2 feet up and 4 feet across the surface. So then you have these weeds that are constantly clogging the river. You have a low water level, which encourages their growth. And now when they die and whatever, they just build it up between the muck and the sand and the sediment. It's becoming a problem for our fry to get back.
Sometimes if the water level is low, it chokes out the fry heading back to the ocean. It'll deplete the oxygen, it'll trap them, and we will see what they call fish kills. We'll see hundreds, maybe seeing thousands of fry dead in the river. And so we are trying to, the project we are trying with the Eco-Harvestor is to pull the weeds out as a trial section of the river.
The milfoil is the material that we're trying to get out of the river. It seeds like a flower and so on. It has its blooming section, but also pieces of it can also land and start to grow. The leaves, the stems, what have you. So the methodology that we proposed and gotten a permit is for a machine called an Eco-Harvester. And this machine actually pulls the material out by the roots so that you don't leave anything. It also collects that material so that there will not be any pieces floating down river and what have you. That material is collected and then it would be taken to the shore, taken away from the river and allowed to dry out and rot.
Number one, the channel itself has choked off. But one of the changes I see is it's the conversion, because there were weeds back in the 80s when I was canoeing. There were weeds in between the meandering main channel. And it's my suspicion that because it is slow moving, that with those weeds, silt allowed to collect, and with silt collecting, land starts to form. And then during drought seasons, that allows conversion of the type of weeds and conversion of the vegetation from an aquatic vegetation to almost more of a land-based vegetation. And when you go out there today, you'll see a lot of wood stems. Those weren't there to the extent they are today.
This project that we've been working on, it's frustrating. We worked for years on it. We got all the permitting process. One of the other wardens, Ron Burgess, has been working on it for years. There's a study out from 1982 that they proposed back then. They talked about weed removal. Back in the 60s, they talked about weed removal and sand removal. This is not a new problem. It's been ongoing.
Over the last 2 years, we've been obtaining permits from the local Conservation Commission. We currently have wetlands permits from the Middleboro and the Lakeville Conservation Commission. We have a natural heritage permit from the state to proceed. Unfortunately, we're still waiting for a natural heritage permit from the federal government because the river is home to a turtle known as the red-bellied cooter, which is an endangered species. So we certainly want to make sure that we protect those with any work that we do and that doesn't adversely affect them.
We plan just doing the center channel of the river, nothing on the sides to disturb anything else. So we're going to have someone there ahead of the boat looking to keep the red-bellied cooters out of the way. And also, as the weeds are being deposited, they will, along with us volunteers also, will go through all that to make sure none of these turtles are taken into the weeds and, stuck there and they can't get back to the water. We'll get them back in the water too.
In going through this process, the Natural Heritage Program put one constriction on the permitting, and that would be that we would be able to do it in the first 2 weeks of August, because after that you have both the hatchlings of the red-bellied cooter and you would have the fry coming back out of the ponds at its earliest time. So we're constricted in 2 weeks, in the first 2 weeks of August, by our permit.
I think we knew this year was going to be a go when we got the okay from Bill Napolitano stating that the white paper had been reviewed by both the state and the federal U.S. wildlife, fish and game. So that's when we knew, and we had to contact the Eco-Harvester company, C&D, back in July saying we have this possible time frame, could you do it? And a lot of planning went into it. It involved the whole commission.
And finally this year it all came together, all the permits were in place, C&D underwater maintenance was available. Red Lawn Excavating, again, generously donated a machine and their time to help offload the weeds on the Freitas Farm property, and everything finally came together this August.
The reason it took so long was we were trying to meet all the requirements of the various organizations that had power over whether or not this project could be done. This year we finally were able to get into the water and do the project as prescribed by law.
The Eco-Harvester came from Connecticut, from a company called C&D Excavations. And the warden, Brad Day, was in contact with them. Actually, he's been in contact with them for a number of years because this has been a long process coming. It's taken us a few years.
Well, the weed removal project is actually a test project to see if it would be viable in a bigger part of the river. It was limited from Vaughn Street down to a little bit above the Bridge Street crossing.
The area where we were removing the weeds by permit through the Order of Conditions, and all of those other agencies had their concerns written into the program. We were to start where the weed mass occurred between Bridge Street and Vaughn Street and proceed up to Vaughn Street. Initially we wanted to remove all the weeds, but because of the concerns with the hatchlings from the red-bellied cooter, and then of course the returning fry from the herring, we were restricted in time to the first couple of weeks of August.
First thing we had to do was find a place to launch the Eco-Harvester machine, and the Bridge Street canoe launch ramp was a perfect venue for that. We also had to find a place to dump the weeds. Well, through a generous donation from the Freitas farm, they allowed us to use their land to offload and stockpile the weed material.
We've had help from a lot of people along the way, including the Freitases, who are allowing us to deposit the weeds on their property, and they believe they can use that as fertilizer for their farm. So that would be good if that could work out that way.
They use it up in New York State especially to help grow tomatoes. They say it's an excellent fertilizer and mulch.
On August 3rd, C&D Underwater Maintenance brought their little flatbed weed machine, the Eco-Harvester, to town. They brought it into Bridge Street, backed it into the river, and launched it. At that time, John Crane, our turtle expert, and the operator discussed how to go about the project. They both got onto the boat, and it went upstream to the weed mass and started their work.
Well, the Eco-Harvester is a machine that's approximately 18 feet long. It has a very shallow draft, so it works well in shallow ponds and in rivers. It's powered by 2 side paddle wheels, and the mechanism for weed removal is that there's a drum mechanism and a conveyor belt in the front of it that actually pulls the weeds by the roots rather than cutting them off. It draws the weeds up a conveyor belt system and deposits it in a hopper on the back of the machine. When the hopper is full, the machine can pull up to a land area or a dock, reverse the mechanism, and offload the weeds from the hopper through the same conveyor belt onto dry land.
Once the Eco-Harvester came and transported the weeds into their trailer, the trailer would come over where we had a silt fence set up to protect, a silt fence set up in a sea that would protect any red-bellied cootie turtles that escaped the observation of John Crane, which there weren't any.
Initially, when C&D Underwater Maintenance arrived, they actually worked with John Crane, the turtle expert. So the 2 people that were on the boat all day, or for 2 days, were John Crane, who examined any material that was coming up out of the river to ensure that we didn't catch any red-bellied cooties, and the operator, obviously. They worked in tandem to ensure that there weren't any issues.
Moving forward.
Once the milfoil was put down and dumped, a bunch of us wardens would go and we'd rake through the milfoil looking for any red-bellied cootie turtles or any other animals that were trapped, and we didn't really find any.
So the variable milfoil, etc., was removed from the river and, like we said, spread out. The intent was to spread it and dry it, because when it dries out, it's not dormant, it's dead.
You need assistance up there, or? I don't think so. If I do, I'll call you back, but it should be okay.
The Eco-Harvester removes approximately 55 to 60 cubic yards a day. So we have approximately 120 cubic yards of weed removal. And already a few of the wardens have gone down to the pile and we've inspected it. The top part is dying, it's turning black, and eventually you'll be able to crumble it almost into dust. So this pile that we have will eventually sink down to almost nothing.
The plan originally with C&D underwater maintenance was to use 2 days, 2 solid days of work to remove the weeds in that half-mile test patch, and we left a third day in case it was needed, but the project went so well that the first 2 days they completed most of the project, and unfortunately this August, the third day was predicted to be very heavy rains, so we decided that the project went so well in the first 2 days that we didn't need the third day for working.
The goal of the project was to make sure that we had a corridor for the safe out-migration of the herring, and to create also a corridor for the adults to come in to spawn. So our expectations may be greater than what Mother Nature is going to allow us, but the idea was that we'd get this done, prove the project in a riverine environment, and allow it to be used anywhere in the state as a template for anybody who ran into this problem with invasive species.
The plan always was that if the test worked out well, that hopefully a regional agency or a state agency would be able to pick it up and continue weed removal not only in our river, but to use the Nemasket River project as a model to try it with other rivers that might be weed choked.
It's been approximately almost 4 years of work that we've all put into this. Basically, Ron Burgess, one of our fellow herring warden, took the lead on it and organized it. Brad Day was the main person involved with the Eco-Harvester itself, and the rest of our commission were involved in helping with the planning and the running around and getting everything done.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna put that in one of those.
And you see the white lines, that's roots. The machine pulls it up by the roots.
Well, the goals of the weed removal project was simply that it was a test project first to see if it would be viable to do in the rest of the river. The idea was to clean out a patch in the center of the river that would be clear enough that it wouldn't hinder any of the adult herring from migrating upstream, and also would not hinder any of the herring fry, the baby herring that had been hatched, from swimming downstream to the ocean.
Obviously, whatever material is growing along the banks is going to continue to grow. We just hope we're not doing something where you trim something to encourage growth. That's why we worked with an Eco-Harvester, what does a pulling that grabs the plant and pulls it out by the roots. So the only danger is what's actually still growing in the river, rather than cut pieces and trimmed plants.
As far as successful, we don't really know, because it's a test project, it's never been done in a river environment. We were given parameters that we wanted. We weren't allowed 4 feet from the bank, so it's not like we could clear up the whole area. We had to mainly make a channel. We went into an area where there was no discernible current. The weeds were that thick, being out there in a kayak, you couldn't tell which way the river was flowing. After the project was done on the second day, I took a little 30-second video which actually shows a little bit of the weeds flowing down the river. So we went into an environment that had absolutely no discernible flow, and we do have discernible flow. So as far as being successful in that aspect, yes, we created some flow. Now what we have to do, we have to go back and monitor it in a couple of months throughout the year, next spring, to see how quickly it's grown in.
Well, next in terms of the project, we're hoping that that the test patch will be clear for hopefully a few years, but that remains to be seen. We're hoping that a regional or a state agency would pick up the project and also use the Nemasket River as a model for weed removal projects that might occur in other rivers.
You've asked like success and so on, and that's going to be determined in time as far as the project is concerned. To me, working to get that permit, the greater success was the cooperation that we got along the way.